Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, turning our attention to some of the assistant coaching changes in the Big Ten. Jeff Grimes gonna fix Wisconsin?
No, better talent will fix Wisconsin, but Jeff Grimes is probably more in tune with what Luke Fickell wants to do.
In what way? Just like he's an offensive line, good running game, like that.
I think chemistry. There's just the rumors that Fickell and Longo did not really get along.
Oh, fair.
Very well. And I think like losing Tyler Van Dyke threw a wrench in a lot of things for them last season, and it just got worse as they tried to find ways to fix it. They just didn't have any answers to fix it. But I liked what Grimes did at BYU during the COVID season. Thought he didn't have the same success at Baylor. I just think that offensively, it is not that drastically of a difference as far as formations and the kind of things that they'll do. I just think that maybe he's hoping Grimes will be more willing to run the ball when he wants him to run the ball.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
It felt like a weird fit. I mean, I remember we asked Fickell about the run game and the pass game and milk raid, whatever they were calling it.
Dairy raid.
Dairy raid.
You want to stay away from that right now.
And he pushed back right away. He's like, just because we're calling, just because we bring in this guy who's had a history throwing doesn't mean we can't run the football. There was definitely some philosophical differences, I think.
And they were exposed along the way.
They also they took a receiver from BC who couldn't get eligible all year. Their quarterback gets hurt early in the season in the non-con. I don't know. I certainly don't think Longo's like some genius, but I'm not really sure how many folks were going to succeed under that scenario.
No, they weren't going to. No.
At least last year.
So one of the biggest news items truly in all of college football, if I was to go sort the data, shout out to the On College Basketball podcast. If I was to just put a like stake in the ground from early November until maybe mid-December, one of the biggest news items was Bryce Underwood flipping his commitment from LSU to Michigan. And while no changes had been made at that time, I believe there was some buzz that Sharon Moore was going to make a decision to make a change at offensive coordinator, and that maybe some of that might have been communicated and some of that might have been a part of being able to seal the deal. I don't know. It's just hearsay. What we do know is that Bryce Underwood is at Michigan. Kirk Campbell is out as the offensive coordinator, and Michigan has hired Chip Lindsey as the new offensive coordinator. Now, Chip spent a hot second in Chapel Hill with Mac Brown over the last year. He has previously been with the aforementioned Gus Malzahn and others. Tom, what's the signal that we take from Michigan's hire of Chip Lindsey?
I don't know. I mean, you're going to run the ball a lot. I think that's pretty much we're trying to get back to that kind of smash mouth stuff. It's just maybe the goal is to not put too much on Underwood's plate as a freshman, kind of like the Jim Harbaugh plan with JJ McCarthy. When McCarthy's first season, they put him out there, but he wasn't the starter. And then they just kind of worked him in. I don't think that'll be the case at Michigan. I do think Underwood's probably going to start next year, but you don't know. But I just think that they're not going to want him carrying the loads. They're going to lean more on their run game and then let Underwood stick to what he's already good at as he continues to develop. So I think that's the plan. Whether it'll work, I assume it'll be better than it was this year because they're just much better at quarterback than they were last year.
I put it similar. I think it's more about the quarterback play than anything. I mean, it was kind of what we talked about with Nebraska last year when Dylan Raiola comes in. And I know it tapered off and he struggled with interceptions at the end, but it was still better than it was the year before. I think you want to try to minimize Bryce Underwood's exposure as a passer, which fits right into what they want to do. But Chip Lindsey, I mean, he's been a guy, again, he's been around that Gus Malzahn system. They're going to run the football. A lot of play action pass. And I think if anything, they do go back to that style where they ran it every single time with JJ McCarthy. Second half against Penn State, you might see some of those type of games early. But I do wonder if a quarterback come in, that takes a unique personality to be okay with only throwing it a certain amount of times. But he's a freshman who's making a ton of money. So you can do whatever it takes early.
I'm like not excited about the hire.
No.
Right.
At all. Is it going to be worse than what they had? Probably not. Maybe. I think they probably sink or swim based on Underwood.
It kind of screams to me that it's like we've still got Sharon Moore. Like Sharon Moore has to make this hire feeling good about the conversations that he had, that Chip Lindsey sees the world the same way that Sharon Moore, former offensive coordinator, does. I mean, that's got to be what it says. That if when Dabo Swinney hires Garrett Riley, there is some level of you're going to come in and then like you're going to show me new things. Like, there is going to be a little bit of friction that might take a while to be able to get ironed out. To me, and I could be misreading this, feel free to let me know, Michigan fans. I love the information, but to me, when Sharon Moore hires Chip Lindsey, that is an extension of the Sharon Moore vision.
And think about Sharon Moore's role when he was the offensive coordinator on Jim Harbaugh. That was Jim Harbaugh's system.
An extension of Harbaugh's vision.
Right.
Yeah. I could 100% see that. Oh, go ahead.
If you look at this though, like look where he's been. Obviously, offensive analyst at Auburn in 2013. That team was really good at running the ball, specifically with the quarterback. And then he was back at Auburn in 2017, 2018. He went to Troy 2019 to 2021. That didn't work out very well at all. And then UCF with Gus. He obviously is connected there with Gus through that tree. He was with him at Auburn prior, another team that runs the heck out of the quarterback. And then the last 2 years at UNC, obviously UNC had to do a little more QB run this year, I think, than they probably wanted to once Max Johnson went down. So maybe there's an element there of when's the last time Michigan had a really mobile quarterback? Now, McCarthy could run around, to Chip's point, but he wasn't somebody who I think you had to be like truly scared of featuring the legs. A lot of times teams like to work in a young quarterback by running him a good bit as he kind of works into the progression of the passing game. So maybe the reason you go out and get Chip Lindsey is his knowledge of the QB run stuff. Like that would make some sense. It's not like Sharon has called a bunch of that before. However, there is a guy who I think Sharon would know named Harbaugh in Baltimore who has a pretty good amount of experience hiring people with QB run game experience. So if I'm a Michigan fan, I'm hoping that call either has or will be made, certainly to discuss some of that stuff.
Elsewhere in the Big Ten, we mentioned Jim Knowles already. Washington picks up former Purdue head coach Ryan Walters as its new DC. Little changeover at offensive coordinator as well, but that's an internal promotion of Jimmy Daugherty. He was somebody who's been linked with Jed Fish through multiple stops, like back to when Jed was offensive coordinator at UCLA. You've got Brian Hartline at offensive coordinator, Matt Patricia at defensive coordinator for Ohio State, Pep Hamilton at Maryland. Tom, anywhere that you want to go as we look at the rest of the Big Ten assistant coaching changes, what stands out to you?
First of all, Washington defensive backs, get ready to learn man coverage, buddy. The biggest, most impactful one to me, I think, is Brian Hartline taking over as offensive coordinator at Ohio State. Not for Hartline as much as for what you're losing. You've lost Chip Kelly, who is one of the most experienced and best play callers of this kind of playoff era, the BCS playoff era. Like, he's had success at multiple places. He's had, and now you're replacing him with a guy who doesn't really have much experience doing it at all. Like, he's been great at recruiting, developing, and coaching wide receivers, and he's had an important part on that staff, but calling plays has never been one of his jobs for the most part. So you're taking over a team that's going to have a new quarterback who's replacing some players, but you still have very good guys on offense in Jeremiah Smith. And you're putting him in a spot where expectations are going to be high. And we know Ohio State fans do not deal with losses typically well. They do not deal with failure very well. So there's a lot of pressure on it right from the start. And we'll also see, too, because I don't think it's a coincidence that the first year Ryan Day really gives up play calling is the year Ohio State finally wins a national title with all that talent. And when he was allowed to just be the head coach instead of worrying about the offense all the time. So does Ryan Day avoid falling into the trap of going back to being the play caller the minute something goes wrong? We don't know. I think that it is going to be a very interesting situation to follow, because it was a couple years ago where Brian Hartline was going to call plays too, remember? And how long did that last?
Fair.
I think you're at Ohio State, but it is, I mean, you have great talent. Like, I think there could be an adjustment period, but I think they'll be okay with Hartline. But it is a big jump, and you're right. Chip Kelly's a great offensive mind. I went in the Big Ten with Dana Holgorsen to Nebraska, a move we saw made, end of last year. But the development of Dylan Raiola seems huge for them. I also hope they have a better offensive line that can protect him a little bit better, because that was when his interception started to jump, was the more pressure that he got. But I thought that was one of the more potentially impactful moves that were made this offseason, was Holgorsen to Nebraska.
But what in the Big Ten stands out to you?
Shoot, I mean, the Ohio State thing is really interesting, as Tom mentioned. Like, can we actually say they upgraded? I don't think so.
No, but I mean, that's like,
he might prove to be an upgrade in the long run, but I think it is very unlikely he's an upgrade in 2025.
Is the program going to be better when we look back 20 years from now, from Brian Hartline finally getting his opportunity? Maybe. But you just cannot, in the moment, year over year, tell me that Chip Kelly to Brian Hartline is an upgrade.
It feels a little like Georgia Bobo-ish. Like, we're going with some guys we know. Like, are we really going with the best? But it could be. And I think if you look at the changes that Ohio State made during the season and how well they adapted to the issues they had, brought on by various things, including several key offensive line injuries, you probably have to give them the benefit of the doubt, just as keep Kirby the benefit of the doubt on his offensive coordinator hires. So, until I guess they prove that they shouldn't have it, you kind of need to trust these guys that they know more than, 4 random podcasters. But it's hard for me to objectively look at these resumes and say that they didn't downgrade.
We're not random. We're supposed to be here.
Somebody in the chat mentioned Oregon keeping Will Stein is a pretty huge keep. I agree with that.
I would agree 100%. All right. Anything else on the Big Ten?
Do we like Washington adding Ryan Walters, DC?
Yes.
I like Ryan Walters as a DC. Yeah. It's going to depend on, you're going to have to get the personnel, but he has done a very good job of coaching up defensive backs throughout his career. I think that you can expect, I mean, you look at Washington in the last however many years, they've done a pretty good job in the secondary for the most part. So I do think it will fit. It's just, it'll look a little different. So we'll see how it goes.